Mom propped her phone against the sugar canister, adjusted the ring light that now lived on our kitchen counter, and said without looking up, "It's not personal, honey. Your brother actually needs the space." I stared past her at the door to my old bedroom, now closed and humming with fans, and tasted that dry metal feeling you get when you realize the new rules were written without you. A year ago, they turned my room into Mason's Livestream studio and told me I could take the couch. For a while, 3 weeks later, I was measuring a cheap studio apartment across town with a tape measure and wiping my eyes on my sleeve so the leasing agent wouldn't see. I told myself I would not look back. I kept my head down for 12 months. Then, on the first Monday of this month, a thick envelope landed in my mailbox and pulled me right back to the same hallway, the same door, and a plan I never thought I'd make. The envelope had my name and my parents' address and a return logo that made my stomach get small, our internet provider. The one Mason had begged me to keep in my name because I had the student discount and he needed the upload speed for the channel. I pried it open with my thumb as I stood by my little kitchen sink in Arlington, the Rangers game murmuring on the neighbor's TV through the drywall. The letter was simple and not at all simple. Notice of promotional period ending, new business class rate effective next cycle, and an equipment charge for a second router I had never seen. The total made my palms go damp, $289 this month, then $349. Late fees pending from a missed autopay because the card on file had expired. I stood there in my socks and tried to breathe through my nose. Behind it was a flyer congratulating creators in your area on new features. I put the letter on the counter, called Mom, and watched the little digital clock over my stove count seconds while it rang. "Sweetheart, we were going to call you," she said, voice bright like she was hosting a show. "Your card must have switched. Can you just pop in the new one? Mason has a big charity stream on the third Saturday. It would be awful timing if anything hiccuped." My mouth went dry. "The account is in my name," I said, steady as I could. "I'm not your billing department." And I never agreed to business class. She hummed her little sound that means my feelings are an obstacle. "That's on me," she said like it was a favor. I upgraded when the upload kept dropping. "Work with me here. Family is a team sport." I pressed my fingers into the laminate counter until the edge bit my skin. "I moved out because you turned my room into a set without asking," I said. "Now I'm getting a bill for a studio I'm not allowed to open the door to." She exhaled. "Please don't dramatize," she said. "Mason brings in real money now. Sponsors. You can expect us to tank that because your pride is hurt." I stared at the ceiling and counted 4 slow breaths. "I expect my name not to be used like a floor mat," I said. "Take it out of my name by Friday." She was quiet for a beat. "We'll talk at dinner on Sunday," she said. "Bring your good mood." By the first Thursday, I had a knot in my neck and a headache that slept in the back of my head. My supervisor at the dealership handed me the keys to a pre-owned sedan for a test drive, and I smiled for the customer and said the lines I always say: solid mileage, clean Carfax, we can run numbers, but the zeros from that letter sat behind my eyes. After my shift, I stopped by my parents' place off Matlock a little after 7. The late local news was teasing a story about a lane closure on I-20. Dad had the Rangers pregame low, and there was a faint electric smell in the hall like warmed plastic. Mason's door was cracked. Purple LED strips leaked onto the carpet like a bruise. He spotted me and waved me in like we were friends. "Careful with the cable," he said, guiding my ankle past a snarl of cords. My old bulletin board with my senior year photos was gone. In its place was a grid of foam tiles, a wall-mounted camera, 2 monitors big enough to land a plane, and my childhood dresser pushed into a corner under a tangle of headsets. "Sponsor sent the light," he said proudly. "Also the chair. Want to see the analytics?" My cheeks went hot. "I want you to get the internet out of my name," I said. He looked like I'd dropped his favorite toy. It helps the channel to keep your discount, he said. We'll make it right, Mom said. He tilted his head toward the hall. She says you're being prickly again. I stared at the stack of shipping boxes where my bookshelf used to be and tried not to picture the night. I zipped my life into 3 bags so he could unbox microphones on camera. You can afford your own bill, I said. If you can afford neon lights. He laughed without humor and slid his headphones around his neck. Guys online are counting on me, he said. They don't come for the internet provider. They come for me. Sunday dinner was meatloaf and green beans and that tight politeness families do when the table is a stage. I brought a salad I knew no one would eat because it gave my hands something to do. Mom's hair was sprayed into place. Dad asked if anyone needed more sweet tea and stared at the TV between bites. Mason sat like a host waiting for a cue. Let's talk solutions, Mom began, the way she does at PTA meetings and HOA potlucks. Your brother is growing quickly. He has a recorded audience. We need reliable service. It makes sense for the family to pitch in. Your account works. So we keep it moving. I put my fork down and folded my hands so they wouldn't shake. No, I said. She blinked. Excuse me? No, I repeated, feeling my throat go tight. End of cycle. I remove my card and close the account. If you want service, open one in your name. Dad took a breath and looked at his plate. Mom's smile got thin. That's generous of you to consider, she said, ignoring the word I'd used. We'll revisit in a month. Mason cleared his throat. My audience expects me live every Saturday, he said, like we were a staff meeting. I can't be waiting on customer service. I swallowed the heat in my chest. I'm not your customer service, I said. And it's not just the bill. You used my Amazon account last week. I got a notification for foam tiles and a ring light. Mom waved her hand. You never turned that thing off, she said. It was convenient. He needed it fast. I looked at my father. Dad? He rubbed his temple and said, Your mother is handling this, and I felt a little click inside. The sound of a lock sliding. The second week, the obstacles lined up like rail cars. My cousin Tessa texted me a screenshot of a group chat where my aunt wrote, She's sabotaging Mason out of jealousy. A moderator from Mason's channel messaged my Instagram with a story about family leeches and a hashtag that made my stomach flip. At the dealership, a customer recognized me from a video where I'd been in the background of a family cookout Mason streamed and made a joke about me being the sister who didn't support the hustle, and I smiled tight and handed him a brochure. Thursday night, there was a knock at my apartment door at 10:30 p.m. That snapped me upright from the couch. It was a police officer doing a welfare check after reports of concerning messages, which turned out to be a line from a comment thread taken out of context. And I stood there in my sleep shirt gripping the doorknob while the air from the hall felt too cool on my bare arms. He was kind, said these calls happen, and left me with a tight chest and a reminder to breathe. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time after that with my phone face down, listening to a late freight train a mile off and counting my breaths until my hands stopped shaking. The first piece of the hidden truth slipped out on the second Friday. I stopped by my parents' house to pick up a package because even after a year, half my mail still tries to go there. Mom was out. Dad waved from his recliner, the Rangers game low. The kitchen counter had an open binder labeled Channel, full of contracts printed from email. I told myself not to snoop. Then I saw my name on a page and my stomach nodded. It was a sponsorship agreement from a chair company with a small paragraph about affiliate links and household account holder, internet services, and there, in the box where they asked for account used for production, Mom had typed my name, my account number, even the last 4 of my card. I heard my pulse in my ears so loud it made the room feel too small. Dad glanced over. Something wrong, he asked, the way you ask when you hope the answer is no. I held the page up with 2 fingers like it might bite me. Did you know my account is in their paperwork? I asked. He looked, then looked away, then rubbed his jaw. Your mother handled the forms, he said. It makes the tax piece easier. I swallowed against the taste in my mouth. For whom? I asked. For all of us, he said, and we both heard the part that wasn't true. I slid the page back into the binder with careful fingers and went to the hall bathroom and ran the faucet until it went warm so I could splash water on my face without gasping. On the second Saturday morning, the heat sat heavy outside and the air inside smelled faintly like powdered sugar because Mom had been filming cookies for a reel. I came by because I wanted to try one more time before I did anything I couldn't undo. Mason was in a hoodie despite the weather, pulling a cable through a clamp. Hey, he said, distracted. Can you hold this for a second? He handed me the end of an HDMI cable like you hand someone a wrench. No, I said, and the word surprised both of us. I need to talk about the bill. He kept moving like I hadn't spoken. Charity stream next week, he said. We'll be able to write off the package. He said it like a fact you couldn't argue with. I followed him into my old room and looked at the posters that weren't mine and the way the shelves bowed under equipment that cost more than 3 months of my rent. It's not just the bill, I said, and my palms were damp. It's my name on papers I didn't sign. It's my account number in your sponsor binder. It's my old life turned into your set. He turned then, finally, and squinted like I was standing in bright sun. You're making it weird, he said. You moved out. You said you wanted to be independent. My throat felt tight and itchy. I wanted a choice, I said. There's a difference. Mom leaned in from the hall with a tray of cookies and that smiling tone that felt like a lid on a pot. Everyone needs to relax, she said. This is good stress. Growth stress. We'll put you down for the internet through the end of the month. Then we reassess. I looked at her and felt the old kid feeling like a rubber band around my ribs. No, I said again, softer. End of the month is the end of the month. The second Sunday came with a thin, cool front and neighbors setting out folding tables for garage sales. I walked 2 blocks and bought a set of measuring spoons for $1 and a cookbook with someone's handwriting in the margins. On my way back, my phone buzzed. A woman from a small sponsor reached out, someone whose logo I recognized from Mason's streams. We're updating paperwork, she said. Can you confirm you're the account holder for the household production internet? I stopped under a sycamore and pressed the phone to my ear. I'm the account holder, I said. But not for production. That's my brother. He uses it. He upgraded it. I didn't agree to that. She cleared her throat. Thank you, she said, and her voice had the tired kindness of someone who spends all day parsing stories. We appreciate clarity. When we hung up, I stood there with one hand on the strap of my tote and felt the small, sharp click of something lining up inside me, the way a drawer finally slides into its track. By the end of week 2, I had tried talking. I had tried asking. I had tried waiting. Each made the knot under my ribs pull tighter. On Tuesday after payday, I took my lunch in my car with the AC running and made a list in a clean notebook that I bought at the pharmacy because I needed something that didn't have old feelings on it. I wrote dates, first Monday, second Friday, second Sunday, and what happened. I wrote who said what. I wrote down the end of cycle date from the internet bill and circled it twice. I underlined the sponsor page with my name once because underlining it twice felt like screaming. When my break was over, I put the notebook in my glove compartment and stared at my face in the rearview mirror until my breathing slowed. A man knocked on the window for a test drive and I smiled and handed him a key and thought about how the job of being a person in a family is to offer the best version of yourself without handing over the deed. That night, the local news ran a cheerful segment about a church pie auction in Mansfield and a 2-minute piece on rising electricity rates. I watched on my phone as I stirred pasta in a scratched pot and let the familiarity of a newscaster's voice make the room feel less small. Then I put the phone down, stood in my little kitchen, and said out loud, to no one, "This stops at the end of the month." The sentence made the hair on my arms prick. I dried the pot, put it back on the shelf, and sat on the couch with the TV muted and the ceiling fan squeaking a rhythm that matched the thud in my chest. A plan was not a hurricane. A plan was a string of dates and steps. I could walk a string of dates and steps. The third week started with a thing I didn't expect. A woman from the HOA emailed me because I used to be on the committee that plans the neighborhood garage sale, and she still had me in her contacts. "Quick question," she wrote. "We had a complaint about a commercial studio operating from your parents' address. Does your brother run a business there?" I felt the room go slightly out of focus the way it does when your blood drops. I read the email 3 times and set my phone down like it was warm. I didn't answer right away because the part of me that wants to be fair had learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is breathe before you speak. I got up, ran the tap until the water went cool, and took 2 sips. Then I wrote back, "I no longer live there and am not involved in household decisions. Please contact the homeowner for clarity." My hands still shook when I hit send. I put the phone face down and walked a slow loop around my apartment counting steps until I felt the ground again. The plan didn't need the HOA. The plan needed me to hold the line I'd drawn in pen. Wednesday after lunch, I stopped by my parents' house because Dad texted, "Come by if you can," which is his way of saying he needed a face in the room that wasn't a camera. He was already in his recliner, the Rangers on low, the caption scrolling under the screen. "Your mother's out," he said, and for a second the house felt like it used to when I came home to tell him about a school win, and we ate half a pie before dinner and lied about it later. He patted the arm of the chair next to him. "You look tired," he said. "I am," I said, and I listened to the murmur of the game while the ceiling fan ticked. After a minute, he said, "I didn't realize your name was on that paper," and the way he said it made my throat tight. "I didn't either," I said. He rubbed his jaw. "Your mother believes this is a window," he said. "You think it's a door that locks behind you." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "I think I got pushed," I said. He nodded once. "You don't have to fix the house to save yourself," he said, and it was the closest my father had ever gotten to a pep talk. A garage door rumbled next door and a dog barked twice and quiet fell back around us like a blanket you didn't know you were cold without. On Friday, the 3rd one of the month, my phone buzzed at work. It was a notification that an auto-pay had failed for the internet. The letter had warned me. The message came with a cheerful "Fix It Now" button. I stared at it like it was a small, cold animal. I set my phone down on the counter of the dealership, wiped a smear of dust off a brochure, and felt the pound of my heart in my throat. Then I slid the phone into my pocket and made it through the next 2 hours without touching it again. On my break, I walked past the service bay and out to the small strip of grass where the employees smoke, even though I don't smoke, because the open air makes it easier to think. I watched cars move like fish on eye, 1/4 mile away, and let the sound of tires and wind drown out the part of my brain that wants me to fix other people's storms. That night I sat at my little table with a pen that writes smooth even on bad paper and wrote 3 short sentences on an index card. Internet account closes at end of cycle. Any charges after that are not mine. Remove my name from any paperwork. The card fit in my pocket and in my palm, and when I read it out loud, the sentences felt like rails I could put my feet on. I tucked the card into my wallet behind my driver's license. I boiled pasta again because I didn't have it in me to try a new recipe. I stood at the sink while the water ran and felt a kind of calm I hadn't felt since the envelope landed on the first Monday. 3 weeks down. 1 week to go. The end of the month had a date. Dates have a way of arriving whether you're ready or not. Monday came in hot and flat, the kind of Texas morning where the air outside my apartment already felt used by other people, and I walked into the dealership with a knot between my shoulder blades and the index card in my wallet like a stiff little spine. At 10, I took an early break and called the internet provider from the bench behind the service bay because the air moved out there. And a woman named Mel with a patient voice pulled up my account and asked me to verify the security PIN as if we were talking about a simple thing like a new modem. I could feel sweat collect between my shoulder blades when she said the words business class add-on and second router activation and address on Matlock, and I told her I did not authorize upgrades. I did not order extra equipment. And the account would not continue past the end of my cycle on the last Tuesday of the month. She listened and I could hear office sounds on her side, the distant bark of a laugh, a printer whirring, a chair rolling across plastic. Then she said what I needed and dreaded in the same breath. She could schedule a disconnect. She could set a hard stop on autopay. She could add a note that no one may make changes without the security PIN and a voice verification from me. And she could send me a written confirmation with a date and timestamp that would hold if anyone tried to reopen it like a jammed drawer. After the cutoff, she added, the address can start a new account under a new name with a fresh credit check, but it cannot ride on yours. That's the policy. The breath came out of me in a way that made me lightheaded. Please schedule it, I said, hearing my voice go calm the way it does when I sell a family a minivan they can afford. She clicked and typed and read back the date and time, last Tuesday of the month at 9 in the morning. You'll get an email and a letter, she said. And I'm putting a note in plain English so the next person who opens this sees it. You'd be surprised how often plain English helps. When I hung up, my hands were cold even though the sun was hard on my face. I sat there on the bench and watched a service tech wheel a set of tires past me and felt the kind of steady you get when a train finally starts moving, slow at first, but moving. By noon, my mother had left me 2 voicemails under the same breath. We need to talk about what you did, and you cannot make decisions for the family without warning, and Mason sent a text with 3 question marks and a screenshot of a scheduled service change. That had landed in their inbox because he still had access to my account email. I took my lunch in the break room with the vending machine humming and the Rangers pregame low on the small TV mounted at a crooked angle, and I typed back one line, end of cycle means end, and put the phone face down and ate a turkey sandwich that tasted like paper. By 2, Mom was in the showroom in a sundress that said she was the kind of person who had solutions in her purse. She stood too close to my desk and said my name the way she says, "Excuse me," to retail clerks. "You cannot sabotage your brother's charity stream," she said, ignoring the way my manager peeked over his cubicle like a prairie dog. I kept my voice even. "I'm not touching your stream," I said. "I'm ending an account in my name. You can open your own today." She wrapped her fingers around the strap of her handbag and leaned in like she could scoop my resolve around with her hips. "That upgrade only happened because you were a student and the account started cheap," she said. "You owe it to us to keep it affordable while he gets through this push." I could feel my scalp tighten the way it does before I cry, and I would not cry in the dealership under the smell of new upholstery. "I owe you love and honesty," I said. "I don't owe you my account number." She blinked once, hard, like she had grit in her eye, and then she turned to leave, tossed, "We'll remember this when you need something," over her shoulder like a spare napkin, and walked out through the automatic doors that sighed as if the building was relieved. That night I sat at my small table with the email from Mel open on my laptop, the confirmation in black and white, and I forwarded it to myself twice because redundancy calms me. The local news ran a segment about a heat advisory and a piece about a school supply drive that would turn the church gym into a sea of backpacks on the second Saturday next month, and the familiar cadence helped my breathing. Then the first knock landed on my door at 9, light but insistent, and I checked the peephole expecting a neighbor with a package. It was a young man in a hoodie I recognized from Mason's Discord, a moderator whose name I'd seen in chat scrolling past with blue wrench icons like tiny badges. He rocked on his heels like he had practiced this in a mirror. "We just want to talk," he said when I cracked the door and left the chain on because my heart had climbed into my throat. "You can't cut the cord right before the fundraiser." I felt a wave of heat climb my neck, anger layered right under fear. "You cannot come to my home," I said, keeping my voice from shaking by holding the chain tighter than I needed to. "If you do this again, I will call the police." He raised his hands like gravity had just gotten heavier. "We're just trying to help him," he said, and I shut the door and stood with my back against it until I could feel my pulse move down from my mouth. Tuesday, the third one of the month, held out a hand I did not expect. The woman from the small sponsor called me back, the one who had asked about the household account, and said her name was Karina and she was updating compliance files and had a couple of questions. I braced myself for the part where I was the villain. Instead, she asked me to confirm the dates I had mentioned under the sycamore, the upgrade timeline, the second router, the auto-pay failure. Then she said, "I need to be clear, I am not looking to start a fight. We simply need accurate documentation because we have our own auditors. If we list a household account holder, that person has to sign off." I stared at the calendar magnet on my fridge as if the grid had instructions on it. "I did not sign," I said. "And I do not consent to my name in sponsor paperwork." She paused long enough for me to hear the keyboard's quiet tick on her side. "Thank you," she said. "I'm sending you a short release form that says exactly that. You sign it and we remove your name. That's all it does." I signed and sent it back before the water for my pasta boiled. 20 minutes later, an email landed in my inbox that said, "Name removed from household account holder across our files. Thank you for the clarity." I did not smile. I put my head in my hands and breathed, and then I stood up and washed the pot because moving keeps me from floating. By Wednesday afternoon, the obstacles were wearing new shirts. My aunt called my boss pretending to be a customer and tried to get a message to me about family duty, and my boss called me into his office and said with the tired patience of a man who once had 3 teenage daughters, "We will not be a messenger service," and handed me a sticky note with a name he had half scribbled out so I would not see it without seeing it. I said thank you even though it wasn't that kind of conversation and walked back to my desk and sold a used SUV to a man whose breath smelled like spearmint gum and patience. After work, I drove to my parents' house because Dad had texted, "Stop by if you can," 7-ish, and the way he hyphenated time meant he was trying to be specific and kind at once. I walked in on the end of Mason's stream, the chat rolling with hearts, the voice in his headphones too loud for the volume the room could handle, and Mom in the hallway holding a list titled Deliveries, like she was running a loading dock. "I won't stay," I said, and the smell of ring light heat and energy drinks sat on the air like a coat I did not pick. Mason turned down the music and swiveled his chair. "We're going to crush Saturday," he said, and he smiled at me like I was a camera he decided to love. "We have stretch goals." I could feel my teeth pressed together. "I am not your infrastructure," I said. "You will not say my name on your show." He laughed, and the sound had no humor in it. "They don't know your name," he said, and it could have been mercy if it weren't a shove. Dad was in his recliner with the Rangers on mute and closed captioning on like normal, and he looked at me with that tight mouth that says he has something to show you he does not like. He handed me a letter from a small foundation I had never heard of, on letterhead that looked homemade, with a paragraph congratulating the Family Content Initiative for receiving a microgrant to upgrade the dedicated studio space that previously served as a daughter's bedroom, and thanking the whole family, including our listed household account holder, for the sacrifices that make creativity possible. My throat went so dry I had to swallow twice to get air around it. "Where did you get this?" I asked. He looked toward the kitchen like the answer might be standing there. "Came in the mail," he said. "Your mother puts things on the counter and forgets I can read." I stared at the sentence about sacrifices until the words became shapes. They used my name as proof of sacrifice, I said, and I did not realize I was trembling until the paper shook in my hands. Dad rubbed the bridge of his nose with his thumb and forefinger the way he does when the late innings go sideways. I should have asked more questions last year, he said, and the last word caught in his throat like a chip he had swallowed wrong. I folded the letter carefully because if I tore it I would not remember what it looked like, and I slid it into my tote bag and nodded because if I spoke I would say everything in the wrong order. On Thursday afternoon, last one before the stream, Karina called again and said their legal had flagged the household account, language across several small brands linked to Mason's channel. And she asked if I wanted them to pass along my release to the affiliate network so I would not have to send it 5 times. I said yes and heard myself say thank you in a tone that sounded too practiced, and she said, "We're not the police. We just need clean files," and I said, "I know," and hung up and sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the outline of my quick-assembled bookshelf against the wall. An hour later, I got 3 forwarded confirmations in a row, each with my name struck through like a teacher fixing a roster. I watched the lines of text change in front of my eyes and felt that itchy tightness in my chest ease just enough to take a full breath. Then Mason posted a story on his channel about unexpected red tape from family that doesn't believe in the grind, and my cousin Tessa posted a comment with a heart that made my stomach harden like cold rice. Friday's escalation arrived in a soft envelope with my name handwritten on the front. It was a thank you card from a little boy who had won a gaming chair in a past stream drawing, which would have been sweet if the inside didn't include a printed QR code that said "Tip the channel here" and a line thanking the sister who provides the internet. My ears went hot like someone had slapped me. I looked at the handwriting and wondered if his mother had filled it out or if someone on Mason's team was sending freebies with narratives attached. I set the card aside, put my head down on the cool laminate of my table, and breathed through my nose until my eyes stopped burning. That evening, after closing, I found an envelope under my apartment door with no return address and a printed note that read, "Do the right thing for once," and a photo of my apartment building someone had pulled from Google with my unit circled in red. And my hands started to shake all over again. I called the non-emergency number and told the woman on the phone that I had received a piece of mail that made me feel unsafe, and she said to hold on to it and to call back if anyone knocked like that again. And I said thank you even though thank you did not fit anywhere in that sentence. I put the photo in a folder with a harmless name on my computer because I had watched enough Life to know you keep receipts you wish you never had to see again. I woke up on the 3rd Saturday with my stomach clenched tight and a set of steps lined up in my head like mile markers. I made coffee, wrote the time of the scheduled disconnect on a sticky note and stuck it to my tote even though I knew the date and hour by heart, put the foundation letter and the sponsor releases in clear sleeves so paper wouldn't curl in the heat, and drove toward my parents' house with the air on high even though the radio said the heat would break by evening. The driveway was full of cars I did not recognize, the kind of mid-priced sedans you get when you hustle side gigs, and through the front window I could see ring lights reflecting off framed family photos that did not have me in them anymore. Mom opened the door before I knocked because she is always moving toward the next moment. "You cannot be here if you are going to bring your attitude," she said, still smiling in case a camera saw her in profile. "I'm here to tell the truth and leave," I said, and I stepped past her before she could decide to plant her body in the door frame. The house felt louder than every other Saturday because the air conditioner was running hard and the conversation in the chat was turned up on a speaker like a parrot repeating phrases. Mason was at his desk in my old room, the same room where I had taped up dance recital programs on a closet door, and he was counting down to live like a pilot at takeoff. "We're doing good today," he said, face close to the camera. "We're going to make a difference," and his voice softened in a way that would have charmed me if I didn't know which account was feeding the upload. I stood in the doorway and tasted the plastic in the air. Dad stood near the hall with his keys in his hand and a look like he had lost a set of directions. I touched his elbow. "I'm going to say a few sentences," I said, and the words steadied me because they were small enough to memorize. "I'll be gone in 2 minutes." He nodded, the way a person nods in church when the hymn is one they know by heart. I walked back into the living room, where Mom had arranged platters of cookies and a stack of branded stickers that said my brother's handle without using his actual name, because the house had become a set and sets need props. I put my tote on the coffee table, took the letter from the foundation out of the plastic sleeve, and placed it beside the sponsor release with my name struck in clean gray lines. I kept my voice flat and slow. "The internet account ends Tuesday at 9, I said to Mom because she was the gravity in the room, the person things fall toward. "My name has been removed from any paperwork that says I am part of this production. If you say otherwise, I will correct it with the people whose names are on your checks." She stepped closer and lowered her voice so it was twice as sharp. "You are petty," she said. "You are jealous." I felt that old type pull behind my eyes and let it pass without hooking me. "I am finished," I said. "That's the word you're looking for." She looked like she wanted to laugh and found she couldn't. I turned to leave and caught Mason's eye through the doorway. He was gesturing big to the camera, warming up the audience, and for a second he looked like the little boy who used to run down the hallway in a blanket cape and slide in his socks to make us both laugh. Then he smirked in the way he does when he's winning, and he mouthed, "We'll be fine without you," and I felt a line draw itself under my month. I walked out past the ring lights and the neat stack of boxes and the framed family picture where I am 12 and sunburned and holding a paper plate with a hamburger, and I opened the front door and let the noise drop behind me as if I had just ended a call. Sunday morning came with a small mercy of a breeze, and I set a bag of old clothes by my door to take to the thrift store after lunch, because moving things out is how I make room for air. Before I left, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number that said, "We need to confirm your identity for a charity payout," and for one wild second I thought someone was trying to be kind. Then I saw the email included a link that looked like a trap with its letters in the wrong places, and I took a screenshot and forwarded it to myself with the subject line "No," because evidence matters even when it looks small. At noon I drove to the thrift store and a man in a bright vest unloaded my trunk and thanked me twice, and I felt my shoulders drop an inch. On the way back, the local station ran a piece about a lost dog found 12 miles from home and a tips segment about watching out for email scams, and I laughed one short laugh at the weird timing and merged onto I-20 with the air on low. Monday slid into place like a drawer that used to stick and now moves clean, and I took my break at 10 and walked across the parking lot to stand under the one tree that throws a decent patch of shade, and my phone lit up with a call from Karina. "Just a courtesy," she said. "We paused our small spend on the channel until the documentation matches reality. It's not personal, it's policy, and we told them that. There's a simple way forward for them, new account in their name, new paperwork, everyone signs their own lines." I pressed my tongue to the roof of my mouth to stop the thank you that wanted to spill. "I appreciate the clarity," I said, and she added after a pause, "You're not the only person who's had to draw a boundary like this. It always looks worse up close." I ended the call and looked at the asphalt shimmer, the way heat makes the air look like it's moving even when it's not, and I decided I would take the long way home that night just to see the sky change over the river, because small quiet things had started to feel like medicine I could afford. On the last Monday night of the month, the house across from my parents held a garage sale that spilled into the evening because the heat was finally low enough to let people stand and chat. And I walked by on my way to my car after dropping off a bag of Mason's old t-shirts I found in a bottom drawer at my place, shirts he'd left when he borrowed my laundry basket last summer. The neighbors were friendly in that way where they don't ask questions, but their eyes do, and the man who always grills on game days waved his tongs and said, "Your brother's doing a big thing this week." Huh, and I said, "He is," and kept walking because every other sentence that wanted to follow would have turned me into a story I didn't want to read. When I got home, I wrote the exact time of the disconnect on a sticky note again and stuck it on the edge of my kitchen cabinet. Not because I didn't trust the email, but because the act of writing it in my own hand made it feel real in my bones. Tuesday morning, I woke up before my alarm with my jaw sore from clenching in my sleep, and the sky outside my window had that pale color it gets right before the heat turns the day flat. And I made coffee and stood in my kitchen staring at the clock on the stove, as if I could make 9 o'clock arrive faster by looking at it. I didn't need to be anywhere but my own kitchen to feel the moment when the account became a closed door I did not have to hold open with my foot anymore. At 9 the minute hand clicked, and somewhere on a server I will never see a flag flipped from active to off. I didn't cheer. I didn't call anyone. I put my hand on the counter to feel something solid under my palm, and I felt my heart bump against the inside of my chest like a fist finding a rhythm. And then I picked up my keys and walked out to my car because I still had a job and a life that could move without asking anyone for a permission slip. At 9:07 my phone buzzed with a line of texts that arrived in a rush like a storm advance, a string of question marks from Mason, a photo from Mom of the Modem with its lights dark and a caption that read, "This is childish." A voice memo from an unknown number that said, "Turn it back on now," in a voice trying too hard to be calm, and an email from Mel, right on time, with the subject, "Confirmation of account termination," and a PDF attached with all the dates and clean lines that even my mother would not be able to pretend were a misunderstanding. I was halfway to the dealership by then, my radio off, my windows cracked for air, my index card in my wallet like a talisman I had made myself, and the day had the shape of a decision I had finally stuck to even when my knees wanted to bend. I parked, turned off the car, and sat for a second with my hands on the wheel, remembering the feel of the binder with my name in it, the LED lights leaking under the door of my old room, the way my father's thumb rubbed the bridge of his nose when he read the letter with the word sacrifice, and I knew the next part would not be quiet. When I walked into the showroom, my manager looked up with that careful face he uses for customers who insist the price online must be a misprint, and he said, "Your mother called the main line again," and I felt the old tightness try to climb my neck and fail. Carla from compliance picked up and told her we don't relay personal messages, he said, and he handed me nothing because there was nothing to hand me, and I nodded because sometimes calm is a box you carry alone. The rest of the morning moved like every other morning, oil changes and test drives and a coffee machine that needed more grounds. And I did not answer my phone because my life at work pays my rent, and my rent buys me the right to wake up in a room where no one has mounted a camera on the wall without asking me. At lunch, I took my sandwich to the bench under the thin tree and watched a cloud try to form and fail, and I let the quiet land on my skin the way heat does when you stop fighting it. By 1:30, the text shifted tone. Mason sent a screenshot of a donation bar stuck at 0 with the word paused over it in gray, the chat complaining about lag, a moderator typing switching networks with exclamation points. Mom sent a photo of a new modem still in a box with a caption, "They can't get here until Thursday," and a follow-up, "This is on you." I did not answer. At 3, I got an email from Karina with a single line, "Our spend remains paused until documentation is corrected. I have communicated this to them," and I closed my eyes and let the neatness of the sentence calm my heartbeat. At 4:30, as I was closing a deal on a compact sedan with a woman who needed better gas mileage before her commute changed on the 1st of next month, my phone started to ring constantly enough that my boss's eyebrows lifted. And I flipped it face down and finished the paperwork without one extra word because I am the kind of person who does her job even when the air in her pocket is on fire. When the customer drove off in her new car, I sat in my chair and finally listened to one voicemail, the one from my father that had landed in the middle of all the noise. "He's at the library trying to run the stream on their guest Wi-Fi," he said, and he sighed, and you could hear the announcer from the Rangers game in the background doing that calm talk that makes even bad innings sound manageable. "Your mother is furious," he added. "I'm making tea." I swallowed around the knot in my throat and stared at the floor until the feeling passed. I left work at 6 to a sky that had finally decided to be blue instead of white, and I drove past the branch library to see if the story was true, and there, through the front window, in the corner near the community bulletin board where they post flyers for tutoring and tax help and pancake breakfasts, was my brother with his laptop propped on a stack of picture books, ring light on a portable stand, a tangle of cables at his feet, his mouth set in a line that would look like determination in a thumbnail and like something else to someone who had watched him pack up my life so he could unbox equipment on camera. I pulled into a spot where he couldn't see me and watched for 1 minute that felt longer, and I watched a librarian walk over and point to a sign about noise, and I watched Mason nod and shift and turn the ring light down, and I watched the chat on his screen roll in a way that probably felt like love to him even as the signal stuttered. Then I pulled out and drove home because my part of the story was never going to look good in his chat. When I got inside my apartment, the air felt cooler than it had that morning, the kind of relief that doesn't last long, but you take it anyway. And I sat on my couch with my tote at my feet and the folder with the foundation letter and the sponsor releases and the ISP confirmation like a stack of flat stones I had carried up a hill. My phone buzzed and then went quiet, and I held still and listened to the building settle and a neighbor cough and a TV 2 walls away murmuring about a weather front rolling in from the west. And I knew the last act was going to cost me something I hadn't named yet. I picked up my pen and wrote one more line on my index card under the others, the one my father had taken a month to hand me without knowing he had. "You don't have to fix the house to save yourself." Then I put the card back behind my driver's license and sat very still with my palms flat on my knees until my breathing matched the tick of the kitchen clock, and when it did, I knew what I would do tomorrow. On Wednesday, I woke up with the taste of old pennies in my mouth and a plan that felt like it had corners, not fog, and I took my coffee black because milk made my stomach coil. Then set my laptop on the table and read Mel's confirmation 3 times like a spell I didn't believe would stick until it did. At 9:30, I typed a short note to the tiny foundation whose letter I had slipped into my tote, the one that had thanked the whole family, including our listed household account holder, for the sacrifices that make creativity possible, and I attached a scan of their own paragraph with my name circled in blue, and below it I wrote that my name was not part of a studio, that the sacrifice they'd noted was me being moved off a couch into a $905 studio across town while my brother hung foam tiles where my bookshelf had been, and that I was asking them only to correct their file and not to use my name again. I hit send and watched the cursor blink and tried to breathe slow until my ribs loosened, and because sitting still made my hands shake, I put on sandals and drove the 6 miles to the branch library with the quiet children's corner because I wanted to stand in the place where my brother had tried to turn free Wi-Fi into a stage and leave something that belonged to me behind without asking anyone for permission. The librarian at the front desk wore a lanyard with little book charms and had a voice that made people lower theirs without feeling scolded. And when I set a folded check next to the donation jar for the literacy program, she smiled like I had handed her a sandwich on a long day. I said I was from the neighborhood and wanted to say thank you for the air conditioning and the way the light fell in the corner where the bulletin board was, and I did not say my brother's name or mine, and she said, We're grateful for quiet gifts, and slid the check into a blue envelope without reading it, which made something in my chest soften for the first time in 3 weeks. As I turned to go, she asked, light, not fishing, if I knew the young man who had tried to film in the corner by the new fiction because they'd had to point to a policy sign twice, and I kept my face even and said the words that fit in my mouth without burning, that he was a neighbor's kid with big plans and not a person I could manage, and she nodded once with the look librarians get when they have seen 20 versions of the same story and still believe books and good mouths can help. By noon, my phone dings had the rhythm of a pot about to boil, and I put it in a drawer and ate a sandwich staring at the wall clock in the break room until my shoulders dropped, then took it back out and saw 2 new messages that made my palms sweat. One from Karina with a clean paragraph that said, the affiliate network has updated files, your name is removed. We have communicated that further use is not permitted without your consent, and the other from the Micro Foundation with a subject line that forced my breath to stutter, program note regarding your letter, and inside it said they had updated their description of the Family Content Initiative, removed the household account holder mention, and placed the micro grant on hold pending updated compliance verification because accuracy matters to donors, and that there was a process to return funds if documentation didn't match, and they thanked me for helping our small office keep records straight. I didn't smile, and I didn't cry. I just put my head down on my forearm on the break room table for 3 slow breaths because I could feel my pulse in my jaw, and the room smelled like burnt coffee and floor cleaner, and both scents were normal enough to hold me steady while I decided the next thing. I drove to my parents that evening because Dad had texted, please, 7, not 7-ish, and those commas mean he was bracing, and when I walked in the front room had the echo of a house that had swallowed a crowd and didn't like the taste. Ring lights dark in the corner, a collapse of cables on the carpet, and Mom at the kitchen island tearing at a roll of paper towels like they owed her money. The TV showed the Rangers down by 2 with the caption on, and Dad held the remote with his thumb, like he didn't trust the volume button not to blow the house up, and Mason paced the hall muttering into his phone, no, we're handling it, the ISP messed up, like there was an off-stage villain he could point to for a better thumbnail. Mom started without greeting, you did this on purpose, she said, pointing the torn paper towel like a baton, and she wanted the room to nod, but it didn't, because Dad looked at me with that tired brown that means he's of 2 minds. And I put my tote on a chair so my hands had something to do besides shake, and I said I had ended an account that carried my name and that I had not told a single donor anything private, and she said it didn't matter because the story had traveled. That affiliates had paused spend, and a small foundation with an attitude problem had asked for clarification, and I said that paper had my name on it, and I had clarified, and then she said the line I knew she had in her pocket. You're ruining your brother's work because you can't stand he found his lane, and I felt the old itch climb the back of my neck, but I did not scratch it. I took a breath through my teeth and kept it, and Dad set the remote down slow like a bomb tech and said to her, not to me, did you type her account number into those forms? And she bit off. Everyone knows family shares, and that was the first time I saw my father's mouth go into a shape that looked like he had finally put a word sharper than honey into a sentence. Mason came in from the hall holding his phone like a shield and leaned his hip against my old dresser where he keeps ring light attachments in the top drawer, and he said, I told them the ISP flaked, we'll tether and be back in 15. And his eyes were flat and bright the way they get when he's performing to a lens and not to a person, and I said, you will not say my name, and he said, they don't know your name, and it sounded like mercy for a heartbeat, and then it was a shove again. I stepped closer so I wouldn't have to raise my voice and asked him if he understood that listing me in deals when I hadn't signed could get me letters in the mail that I did not ask to open, and he said, You always make yourself the main character. And the sentence slid down the center of my chest like a zipper snagging skin, and I wanted to answer mean, but what came out was small and clean. I signed a lease in my name, and I pay it with my own checks, if that's your definition of main character. You need a new library card, and he frowned like he didn't understand joke language spoken quietly in a room where everyone else is yelling. Dad found my eye like a man in a crowd catching a lifeguard's hand and said, "I'll drive you home," and Mom said, "She can see herself out," and then the doorbell rang, which made all of us jump because nothing makes you feel 12 like a tone you can't control in a house you grew up in. It was a church friend with a tray of deviled eggs and a kind face that went stiff when she saw the room, and Mom fixed her smile like a clasp on a bracelet and said, "You're an angel," and took the eggs and avoided my stare, and I stepped into the hall because I needed to stand somewhere that didn't smell like 4 moods and powder sugar, and Dad followed me holding his keys like a ticket he might not get to use. On the porch, the air was thick and not moving, and the cicadas were so loud you had to lean to hear a person, and Dad said, "You're right," without a warm-up line, which is a sentence so rare in this family it made my chest ache, and I said, "I'm tired." And he nodded like he was counting innings left and said he couldn't untie the knot she had pulled tight around Mason and the studio and the word sacrifice, but he could say out loud on a Tuesday that my name was my name, and if I needed him to put that in writing somewhere that wasn't a couch chat, he would borrow a pen and do it. I nodded because nodding was the safest thing I could do without crying, and he said, "I'll be by Thursday," which is how he tells you he's putting his car in your driveway as a statement, not a suggestion. On Thursday morning, I opened my door to find Dad standing in my hallway holding a brown bag with 2 breakfast tacos and a folded piece of paper, and he looked smaller against my white walls than he does in the house with his recliner, like the shrinking people do in end credits when you pull back from a shot, and he said, "I wrote a sentence, and the paper said exactly this. I, Daniel McNally, understand that the internet account in our home was held in my daughter's name without her consent for business use, and I will not allow that to happen again," and the handwriting was careful like school and not like grocery lists, and he signed it with the pen I kept in the dish by the door and dated it and handed me the pen like a baton. And I didn't know where to put the heat that climbed into my face, so I took the tacos like I had invited him and not the other way around, and we sat at my small table, and the tortillas were warm against my fingers, and we ate without filling air with words. Because silence had stopped feeling like accusation in that moment and started feeling like a pause you take when the ump walks out to brush off the plate. After he left, the day got busy at the dealership, and the only time I felt my stomach again was when a woman with a worry line between her eyebrows asked if we had a hybrid under $20,000 because her new commute would be 22 miles each way and gas would eat her. And I found one that wasn't pretty, but ran clean, and when she said yes, her hands fluttered like birds trying not to be seen, and I stood in the copier heat making stacks and thought about how small rescues count even when the streaming world acts like the only scoreboard worth reading lives in a chat window. By the time I got home, a small storm had dragged dust across the parking lot, and the air smelled like wet concrete. And on my doormat was a padded mailer with no return that I almost left for the building manager. But when I picked it up, I felt inside it a familiar weight and opened it to find the cheap picture frame that once held a print of the State Fair cowboy I bought at a flea market and left on my dresser. When I moved out, the same dresser's now serving ring light accessories, and the glass had a crack and someone had taped the back like they'd tried, then quit. There was no note, and I stood in my kitchen holding the small broken rectangle and thought, okay, we're all returning things now. The last Saturday of the month came like a stop sign and not like a cliff, and I slept later than I meant to. then drank coffee sitting cross-legged on my couch and flipped through the local paper because I needed sentences about bond proposals and high school scores. Not comments about lag, and I made myself eggs and heard a knock that made my stomach twist, but it was a kid from the building collecting for a team fundraiser with a sheet of paper on a clipboard and his ears too big for his hat. And I gave him $5 and felt my shoulders drop because his thank you was honest and had no script. I spent the afternoon on small things that felt like I owned them, washing my car, mopping the kitchen, moving the lamp on the side table 2 inches to the left until the room felt like it stopped arguing, and around 5 my phone buzzed with a text from Mason that read, "We're live at 7, different setup, don't pull anything." And for the first time the words didn't make my stomach flip. They made me laugh once, low and small, because pulling anything implies I am standing next to the cord, and I was 4 miles away and had nothing left to yank. At 7, curiosity had me, so I opened the channel without logging in, the way you watch a neighbor's fireworks from your porch so you don't have to pretend you're part of the party. And the camera view was a corner of the living room I grew up in with the ring light dimmer turned down and the sound a little hollow because it wasn't the tight studio with padded walls. And the chat was not happy and then resigned and then helpful because people who want to give in public will find a way to give. And he was smiling like men smile at cameras, and he did not say my name, and he said the ISP had issues and that they were pivoting, and he made a joke about grinding through. And my mom walked behind him with a tray of cookies like she was toggling real life and set decoration, and my dad's knee was in frame for 1 second and then slid out and I turned it off because what you don't watch can't hook you. Sunday I drove the 2 miles to Dad's because he'd texted game with a baseball emoji he must have found by accident because he never uses pictures in messages. And he had a pie sweating on the counter that looked like it had spent an hour in the car in a parking lot, and the crust slid when he cut it, and it didn't matter because pie tastes like pie at 6:30 when the first pitch has just become the third out. He said Mom was at a thing and would be late, which is how he says he is letting the air take a different shape while no one is around to push it back, and we watched the game with the volume low, and he used the remote to back up one play where the shortstop made a throw across his body to first, and we both did the small exhale that means a person did a hard thing and made it look routine. And then in the 7th he reached over and tapped the folder on my lap that I hadn't realized I'd pulled out the way some people touch rabbits' feet and said, "Keep your papers in there. Don't take them out when you're mad." And I nodded because he wasn't wrong. On Monday morning the email I had been braced for and not braced for arrived with a subject so polite it almost slid past, closure of microgrant due to documentation. And the body said the tiny foundation was closing their microgrant and requesting either a return of funds or receipts consistent with a non-business home activity. And there was a sentence prepared by someone careful that said, "We understand this is disappointing," and I put the phone face down and took 3 long breaths with my hand on my own countertop, and then I turned it over and typed my name into a calendar invite for a lease renewal in 2 months, because the most honest revenge I knew was paying my rent on time and not finding myself on anyone else's forms. And 20 minutes later my mother called and let it ring, and I did not pick up because I could hear the shape of that conversation in my bones and knew it would end with me staring at a wall and grinding my teeth, and I had a 10 a.m. appointment with a couple looking for a pre-owned truck that could tow a trailer without killing their savings, and that was more important to my month. When I finally did answer Mom that evening because avoiding her forever is not a grown-up strategy one can live with, she skipped my name and went to the middle of the paragraph. "You cost him a partnership," she said, and her breath hissed like the line had a leak. And I said partners like clean files, and she said, "Family used to mean something," and I said it still does, and she said, "Not to you," and I said it does. Just not the way you want, and I did not list the ways I had been the person Who wiped counters and wrote checks when the curtains needed replacing, I simply said, "We can have dinner on the second Sunday next month. I'll bring salad." And she took a half beat too long and said, "We'll see," which is how she tells you she isn't ready to lose. And I ended the call and went outside with the building's trash and stood by the dumpster in air that smelled like heat and banana peels and felt a wash of tired that didn't knock me over because it was clean, not dirty, and I thought, if all I did this month was move my name back to my own wallet, that is enough. The last night of the month I sat on my couch and the fan ticked and the neighbor's TV murmured about a high-pressure system sliding off toward Oklahoma, and I texted Dad a photo of the signed lease renewal notice, and he sent back a thumbs up he had learned from me. And then another message, "Pie Friday?" with no punctuation, which made me smile and say yes even though Friday is payday and sometimes money is tight. Because I have $10 for crust and cinnamon and courage. I put the ISP letter behind my tax returns, not in front. Because I am finished reading that chapter out loud to myself, and when my phone buzzed with a text from Mason that only said, "We figured it out," I typed back, "Good," and left it at that because I no longer had to be his infrastructure to be his sister, and I could decide next month if I wanted to be his friend. So that's what the revenge looked like in real life. No shouting in a parking lot, no broken dishes, no speeches in front of strangers. Just a series of dates and papers and small sentences that hit the right part of a ledger and forced other people to pick up pens and put their names where they should go. It was harsh because it cost them money and convenience and a story they had been telling about sacrifice that sounded noble until the person you named raised her hand and said, "Not mine." And it was fair because I didn't take anything that wasn't already mine back. I only stopped handing it out on demand. I lay in bed that night and my jaw didn't ache and my shoulders didn't sit like rocks under my ears, and the only sound was the air conditioner clicking off. And I realized I had not checked my phone while half asleep to make sure a bill I didn't authorize wasn't bouncing around my account. And I felt a kind of quiet I haven't had since the day my mother propped a ring light in our kitchen and said my brother needed the space more than I did. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm and made toast and poured coffee and watched the local news talk about a city council vote over speed bumps and a lost dog now found 3 miles from home with a harness on. And none of it had to do with me and all of it made sense. And I texted my father to ask if he wanted me to pick up Cool Whip because he was never going to whip cream on a weeknight. And he wrote, "Yes," and then, after a minute, "Proud of you." And I took a breath so deep it pressed against the tops of my lungs, and for the first time in a year, I believed him.